I'm Dave Penn. I'm a titles designer and motion graphic artist from London. I started out, I suppose, around about 1999. I kind of answered an ad in the newspaper. Actually, one of my friends posted it through the door and thought it might be something I was interested in for a video editor stroke designer. And yeah, I'd just done an English degree. I'd just graduated from Liverpool University. I'd done English, of all things, but I always had this interest in film, and I didn't really have a clue how you got into it. So I responded to this ad, ended up getting it, moved down to London, and it was kind of it was a fairly corporate, kind of not all that inspiring place to start. But I had access to an Avid there, and so I learnt to edit. And I was kind of busking the design, really, because I just kind of taught myself on like a Commodore Amiga with Deluxe Paint and programs like that. I'd just been playing around. So and then during university, just as a hobby, I'd kind of been mocking up some things and sketching some things on the computer. And so I kind of printed all that stuff out, and that's how I got that job. And so I was designing a little bit and editing at the same time, and I really found that my editing was very. I enjoyed the short form stuff more, and I enjoyed kind of experimenting with transitions and effects, but it was really limited what you could do. And I found by chance, really, just a box on top of one of the cupboards, and it was After Effects, and I didn't even really know what that was, but I was intrigued because I noticed it was Adobe. And it just turned out to be exactly what I was looking for. And so I just spent a while just experimenting, because there weren't many tutorials and stuff online, or there weren't any that I knew of. It just email was relatively novel about that time. So yeah, I just kind of for ages was just kind of experimenting with this and trying to integrate it into the kind of workflow a bit, and trying to find excuses really to use After Effects. And yeah, I think that's kind of where it started for me. I mean, it was still kind of the bias was towards editing for the duration of that job. And then the next job I did, it was kind of becoming 50-50. They needed title sequences and stuff. And so that second job I did in London, that was where the titles started creeping in, and I was just kind of trying to find an opportunity really to use After Effects still. This idea that clients aren't idiots, I think that's the kind of default reaction is like, oh, they're asking something that wasn't in our plan, and to sometimes try and react to that positively, or sometimes it can throw you off track, but it can sometimes wind up getting you in an interesting direction, or I try to bear that in mind. Just think like, try not to be too headstrong, and not necessarily think I've definitely got this right. I mean, if I'm confident in an idea, I do try and kind of argue my case, but I will try and take input from elsewhere. I mean, I guess that was really important on the editor, that because I was working on my own in my flat on that, and it's kind of quite it is kind of like a vacuum. So it was great to have James doing the audio, and that he kind of popped by halfway through and just showing him stuff, and he would kind of comment if anything seemed like the style wasn't consistent all the way through. Like he commented on one bit, and I knew that I wasn't happy with that part, but I'm not sure whether that would have snuck in if he hadn't have said something. As soon as he said something, I was like, yeah, that has to come out. I have to rethink that bit. But again, that came about through it being a hole in my storyboard, really. I tried to storyboard that piece so carefully, and I do try to kind of, like I say, just think things through in terms of, particularly for a piece of work like the editor, I really wanted to think of every transition really carefully, and not, because I think that really shows where you've tried to shoehorn it or push it in a way that it's going to only result in a kind of awkwardness. if you kind of think it through really carefully before, I think that you tend to avoid that. So I put tons of time into thinking really carefully about how I would get to the different key setups, but there was one part that I hadn't really, somehow I'd overlooked, and that was the bit that ended up looking inconsistent. And yeah, it was really great to have James there going, oh yeah, what's this? This looks a bit, this doesn't quite work as well as the rest of it. It's always been a really tricky decision because, you know, some of the clients that I've really enjoyed working with have kind of mentioned like my attitude to freelance and stuff and full time, and I guess I have got I've got so used to freelancing from I think I went freelance in 2001 or 2002, so it's such a long time, 15 years or whatever I've been freelance. I've really got used to being able to, if I've had an exhausting job, to think, right, I'm just going to take a week or 2 weeks before I, allow anything else to come along. And I love that about freelance, but I do find that your use of time isn't always great. It's quite hard to relax. I always find during my time off that I'm thinking about, I should cut a new reel or I should contact clients. That my time off, it doesn't feel like a holiday unless it's been set aside as a specific holiday. But I really have been thinking about the certain benefits of full time in terms of like career progression and stuff. Sometimes I think you can feel a little sort of rudderless when you're freelance. You think, I'm not fully in control of the direction that I'm going in, because you try and be selective about your jobs, but you can only do that up to a certain point. I suppose you can't make the exact type of job materialize. And I've kind of been lucky with the sort of work that's come along. It's really suited me, and I've tried a few different directions. And for a while I thought, wow, this is really meandering, and it's not. And my style's all over the place, and I haven't got. I kind of felt like I want to have a style and I want to have a focus. But all that time of meandering really felt like it helped. So maybe for me that was the benefit of freelance. I tried a lot of different stuff and it kind of got more focused in recent years. But I definitely wouldn't rule out full time. I mean, there's definitely a lot of places that I'd kind of consider going at some point when the time's right, I suppose. I think if my work seems sort of diverse, it might be from trying my hand at a lot of different things, but I think also it's kind of like trying to start. I've been lucky with projects coming along that have every so often that has really given me some creative freedom, and then I've tried to start with an idea rather than with a technique, and so I think that's felt kind of a nice way of doing it, that you don't necessarily know how you'll approach it. I mean, I'll be very likely to do it in After Effects or Cinema 4D, but it's nice to not. I think it's nice not to start off thinking, I've been trying out this new technique and I'll try and shoehorn that in, even though that can pay off. I think it is really nice. It's really satisfying when you start out with a strong idea, and then you do your experimentation, and you kind of learn and you kind of find your way to a look during that project. And I think really I hadn't kind of thought about that with the two pieces I talked about at the event, but both the editor and the White House were very experimental, and I didn't necessarily know how I was going to do some of that stuff. I didn't know which application I was going to use for different parts of those, and I suppose it's that really, and also really a real desire to have different. I really enjoy that. Even though I'd love to have my stuff look like it was made by me in some way, but for it to be really diverse, I think that the people that I really admire, their stuff is fairly diverse. I guess I'm thinking about Elastic there, and seeing them do on one hand something like True Detective and then something like Halt and Catch Fire titles, that blows my mind a bit. So yeah, that's definitely how I want to work, to have things feeling quite broad in terms of the stylistically, I suppose. Working with James has been a real kind of unexpected kind of joy, really, on the jobs. Like I knew I'd really love to work with him, but it was it was such a surprise, kind of, in a sense. What, like with the editor, because I started animating that before I had any audio. And we've kind of since then we've kind of talked about doing it the reverse way round, or experimenting. But for my experience of it, it was so satisfying to do all the animation and then pass it to him and then get it back. I saw the whole thing afresh. It was kind of like seeing the work a bit more objectively. But yeah, I'd work with him really on every project if I could, or at least on an awful lot more. It's kind of hard. That's one of the things about freelancing that I think is hard, that I don't necessarily have the kind of sway with every client to kind of say, we've got to use this guy. So yeah, I would have loved to get him involved in the White House, but yeah. Yeah, it's something that, yeah, definitely we're really keen to kind of do more of that, I think, if the projects come along that allow it. What I really loved about what James did with the Widowmaker is he just picked up every slightest little nuance in there, and certain things that I wasn't sure were working visually. When his sound treatment just made me kind of realize how important sound is, and that you can't ever just think about visuals. That something that may not work is don't kind of give up on that, or don't make a decision until you've seen it with sound. Because definitely I took that on board with the editor, and there's some parts in there that I thought visually, there's a part where it kind of this little triangle shakes like a kind of, the idea is that it's like a spray can, and then it sprays a little bit of paint. But it wasn't selling it to me when I animated that, but I wasn't too worried. I thought I'll wait and see that with the sound. And yeah, there's been numerous examples really working with James where that's been the case, where the sound is kind of, I just thought, oh, this is fine now. I don't, that's complete. I'm completely satisfied with parts that I was unsure about. I think that's probably what I'm most happy about with working with James, that we're such good friends that we can be really honest about about how we feel about each other's work. But yeah, it's just if ever I need to if ever I had to say, like, let's try this, I just feel like we could go over things like almost painstakingly if necessary. It's never really been the case that we've had to do that too much, but it's nice to just know that we can kind of stick at it until it seems really right. But it's rare that he does exactly what I expect with the audio, and there's sometimes that I thought, oh, I thought you would have gone this way, and he's done something slightly different. But I've always felt like he was right. That's kind of what he does, I suppose. So I'm kind of I'm always kind of really impressed with the direction he goes down. There's a bit towards the end of the editor where he's got all these kind of sounds coming in to represent all the ideas that all these clips are kind of, well, it's almost suggestive of a timeline kind of thing. But what he did with the audio there, I had a real smile on my face when I was playing that back, and I don't think I'd even thought what he would do there. And yeah, really, really really nice what he comes up with. Yeah, I think particularly when I started out in After Effects, and like your RAM previews were relatively short and stuff, I really missed the immediacy of editing, and I think that when when you're not able to get a responsive kind of feedback on your work, I kind of struggle with that. So I will kind of want to. I feel like I RAM preview too much, and I'm kind of like watching this over and over and over again, and sometimes I think, geez, what am I doing? I'm just wasting time kind of gratifying myself looking at this bit that seems to work. But I think that is a process, I think, where I'm kind of finding anything, rewatching and just finding if anything just isn't quite there, and maybe that comes from, I don't know, that could come from my time kind of editing, but it definitely feels like it's in some way been a useful foundation. That I never regret that period of editing. It's a really satisfying thing for me to do. I kind of have this idea that I shouldn't rely too heavily on looking at other pieces of motion graphics, and so I do try and look at design in other kind of, not strictly motion design. But yeah, I don't know really. I think it feels like it doesn't, like sometimes I'll try and force it at the start of a project and try and get inspired and maybe go around trying to find bits like design that interests me from, I'll try and look in unexpected places or something. But I find that it feels to me a little bit like that's happening in the background and in life kind of thing. And then and when you start a project, it sometimes, in the best cases, it just kind of tumbles out, I think. But yeah, I find it really hard to know where you're. I always kind of worry about that. I think when a new project comes in, you think, I really hope something kind of comes out. But like I find it tricky to really know what gets the quickest results. I was really pleased with the White House that something came together really quickly with that. And I think that was working from like really great with really great designers over like earlier parts of my career. I worked at This Is Real Art and Tomato and places like that. Other really great places where I met such good designers, and I think I was kind of really influenced by them and their influences, and I think that kind of stuff kind of ends up floating around in there and kind of tumbles out when it's most appropriate. And I know that the still photography as well that we had for like a great photo archive from CNN for that, and that definitely steered us. I kind of felt like immediately there was just stuff like images and kind of compositions starting to present themselves quite quickly just from seeing this really good quality photography, and I kind of wanted to make that really sort of, isolate that and kind of get it really center stage and not do too much, not over cook it really, and try and leave it quite stark and minimal if possible. I used to do more, but I found, as far as personal projects go, I found I would start things, like I started a lot and never finished them. And I see other people that are very good at that, and I'm always really jealous of them. But I do struggle with self-initiated stuff. I've had a few ideas, and like some I was quite fond of, but when I have started self-initiated projects, I've kind of lost faith in the idea halfway through. It's so much work when you actually start trying to execute it, that the idea, I think, needs to be so strong. 17 years, something like that. Yeah, it's been a long old time. I'm not sure where where it all went. Yeah, I didn't really expect to be in London that amount of time. Certainly, I didn't know whether that was going. I guess I thought still that the editing would lead to film. That's what I was hoping, kind of. It's funny how the type of work you find yourself doing, or the kind of direction you naturally follow, you kind of learn what you do through the work you end up doing, in a way. And in a job like that, where it wasn't very, it wasn't necessarily, my first job wasn't necessarily creatively satisfying, but it was quite free to experiment and do things in various ways. So it was a good way of kind of finding my path, really, finding what I enjoyed the most, I think. There didn't seem to be a lot of media degrees and things seemed to be quite new, so I was slightly wary of them. Like now, there's so many great courses that people do, but back then, I kind of just thought, okay, an English degree, that's kind of, but I loved English literature, so I kind of thought that's never going to hold me back, really, although it doesn't present obvious career paths. But the design thing was a bit of a surprise, really, to end up going down that route. Never really looked back too much,